ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage. Over.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, everybody? Gene Baradelli here, rocking it solo for our first ever live show on Spreaker. Yes, folks, we are now independent. Don't have any strings on me no more. Gonna be a great show tonight. And listen, I gotta really talk about the independence of coming to Spreaker for a second. For those of you listening out there, I can finally mention all the networks that we're on, including WNJC 1360 AM, Philadelphia's Renaissance Station, K98 Talk, Rebooting Liberty Radio Network, Red State Talk Radio. I know I'm forgetting one on this, Pundit Press Radio and Sackheads Radio. Thanks for carrying behind enemy lines. We really appreciate it. And that's the first time I've ever been able to mention all of our affiliates and all the places that distribute behind enemy lines from the People's Republic of New York City. I really appreciate the support, the love over the past few weeks and months, and gosh, it's been years. And as we move on to this new venture of being a little more independent, being able to say what we want, being able to do what we want, when we want, all that fun stuff, it's gonna get a lot better for you, our fans, because we've been bringing you a lot more of the great content that we've been bringing you over the years. And tonight's show will be no exception. Tonight we're going to be talking about a couple different things. Obviously, you probably know already what they are. We're going to be talking about the tragedies. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. The tragedies that occurred in France, in Paris. The resilience of the Parisian people. The fire that we've seen from their government and their decisive action against ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call them. There's so many different names now, I don't even know what to call them anymore. We're going to be talking about that during the show, of course. We're going to be talking about the loony left's reactionary, knee-jerk lunacy that they've been talking about, like how to connect the NRA and Republicans to ISIS. Only the loony left folks can come up with something like that. We will then transition, talking about, of course, President Obama's speech at the G20, the press conference he had there, the press reaction to that, which, by the way, folks, to me, quite surprising. You had some major mainstream networks, heavens be, actually criticize Barack Obama and his approach to dealing with a policy issue. Shocking, I know. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about also taking it away from the perspective of terrorism abroad. We'll come back home and we'll talk to former Oklahoma Congressman J.C. about policies within the Obama administration that shows once again that Obama is, as we say in the title of the show, hopelessly unchanged from where he was when he first came to office, trying to make all these fundamental changes to American political culture and society. Thanks, but no thanks. We're kind of happy the way we are. We'll be getting into that, which, of course, what we're talking about, and JC will get into this during the interview, is the Obama administration's overreach, once again, through the administration of the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. Then we're going to shift it back to kind of a mix of local, national, international news. Well, of course, we're talking about the refugee crisis from Syria. A couple of differing points of view on that. I think you're going to be surprised with my point of view on this, folks. It's not as extreme as you think, I don't think. Yes, we have to be compassionate, but we also have to be responsible. We'll get into that a little later. But first, let's get right into it. Obviously, what happened in Paris this past week, a tragedy that I think Shepard Smith kind of Fox News kind of put it best. Paris and France woke up to a new world after this tragedy had happened outside the soccer stadium, outside Bataclan. Horrible terrorist tactics. Oh my God, the loss of life. When you see the graphic photos, folks. Now, and you know what? I don't think enough of us have seen the real, raw nature of terrorism. We're shielded by it from the media. We'll see those photos one day, the day that it happens usually, and then we'll forget it. I'm talking about the photos of the bodies on the ground, blood everywhere, the crime scene, as it were. We don't get exposed to that a lot. Even in our even in movie and television and portraying terror, you don't really see that. What you see is the cleaned up, edited version. But let me tell you something. Nothing impacts people more than seeing what's real. And when I saw the photos of the grisly, graphic, ghastly scene at Bataclan, blood on the floor, dead bodies strewn on the floor with flagrant disregard for human life. Oh my goodness. People like to think that evil doesn't exist in the world. People like to go about their day. They think they got a good beat on things. They think they have their routine. Everything goes according to plan. I'm going to go to this concert. Next thing you know, your life changes and the world changes. People need to understand this. And I think at least that night we all around the world got a taste of that. I mean, being from the People's Republic of New York City, of course, we have a taste of that from the September 11th attacks. Of course, we know exactly what Paris is going through. We know the fear, the uncertainty, the on-edge moments of we don't know what's going to happen next, the state of awareness around you, the hyper-awareness of what's going on around you. It takes your breath away. The energy that you put forth individually and collectively after something like that happens. Wow. It's one of those singular moments that I hope nobody ever has to go through in their life, what we went through, at least in my family, in families here in New York City, and what people are going through right now in Paris. We all know what happened, but let's just take a quick little recap here. And by the way, while we're talking about this recap, let's not forget that on the same day that this happened, President Barack Obama was on ABC News with George Stephanopoulos, that credible journalist that he is. How does a man who worked in government and was basically a spin doctor and a mouthpiece for a Democratic president get considered qualified to report news adequately and fairly and impartially and as it is, not as he wishes it to be? But let's put that aside for a second. Talking to George Stephanopoulos, saying that ISIS is contained. The JV squad is back in the locker room. We don't need to worry about that. We don't need to worry about them. We're doing our job. Everything's A-OK, folks. And then mere hours later, this happens. Let's just think about that for a moment. Take a listen to this.
But ISIS is gaining strength, aren't they?
Well, I don't think they're gaining strength. What is true is that from the start, our goal has been first to contain, and we have contained them.
The death toll from those attacks, at least 120 people dead, by far the deadliest such attacks in France.
And we have contained them.
According to police sources, one, maybe both, were detonated by suicide bombers wearing belts packed with explosives.
And we have contained them.
Some of them were dead, some others were very badly wounded, but it was a bloodbath.
And we have contained them.
Francis Hollande says Paris attacks were committed by the Islamic State.
And we have contained them.
And he said, quote, "The analogy we use around here sometimes, and I think is accurate, is if a JV team puts on Lakers uniforms, that doesn't make them Kobe Bryant." Just how badly did President Obama underestimate the threat of ISIS?
Pretty badly, if you ask me. Complacency is the breeding ground of bad behavior. Think about with your children. When you're complacent in dealing with disciplining your children, what happens? They get more unruly. When you are complacent in disciplining and maintaining order in your employment life, what happens? Things get lax, bad habits develop, bad things happen. Same thing here. This is not a difficult concept. This isn't even a concept of governing. This is a concept of human nature. If you are complacent, bad things develop. And that's exactly what happened here when President Obama is calling out the JV squad. Sorry, Mr. President, but whether or not they were the JV squad, they are now more than just a regional terror threat. They are a full-on terror threat. A worldwide terror threat. And by the way, they have been for some time now. You just haven't recognized it, and you've allowed them to become more emboldened. They hold territory. They hold another country's territory and have set up shop. Come on. Imagine that happening in the United States of America. A group comes in, takes over a part of Utah. Sorry, Utah, I'm using it as an example. Just bear with me for a minute. Takes over a part of Utah and says, "This is ours, you can't have it." No, I'm not talking about Family Guy, and I'm not talking about, what Peter Griffin did with his house. I'm just talking about an armed group of fanatical thugs marches into Salt Lake City and says, "This is now ours," and they defend it with force. They hold people against their will. They install their own laws. They kill people summarily and en masse and arbitrarily, at least to the outside world. Just imagine that, folks. This is happening in another country, a country that, again, let's not go too far back into history, but President Obama left unattended because he wanted to score political points about pulling out of the Middle East. Mistake upon mistake upon mistake. And now he's starting to feel the pressure about it, even from his own people, with being the press. Take a listen to this, folks. Here's a little compilation put together by the Washington Free Beacon. Full credit to them, by the way. They put together some of the best cut audio I've ever heard. I mean, we use them for our Al Sharpton breaks and everything. This is from Washington Free Beacon. I take no credit for this one whatsoever. Take a listen to the pressure that Obama's under.
The terrible events in Paris were obviously a terrible and sickening setback. The United States, in partnership with our coalition, is going to remain relentless on all fronts. We have the right strategy, and we're going to see it through. So with that, I'm going to take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. 129 people were killed in Paris on Friday night. Is it time for your strategy to change?
Have you underestimated their abilities?
If I could ask you to address your critics who say that your reluctance to enter another Middle East war makes the United States weaker and emboldens our enemies.
With respect to the broader issue of my critics, folks want to pop off and have opinions about what they think they would do. Present a specific plan. I don't think I've shown hesitation to act. But what I'm not interested in doing is posing or pursuing some notion of American leadership or America winning or whatever other slogans they come up with. I'm too busy for that.
This is an organization that you once described as a JV team that evolved into a force that has now occupied territory in Iraq and Syria and is now able to use that safe haven to launch attacks in other parts of the world. How is that not underestimating their capabilities?
Well, Jim, I just spent the last three questions answering that very question. I don't know what more you want me to add.
It's been more than a year now. ISIS's capabilities seem to be expanding.